So, we got the tire mounted and balanced. Let's go ahead and let's get it back on the motorcycle. I guess, Octane Restorations, we are back with the 1988 GL1500 Honda Goldwing. And this is part 7, so today we are going to be installing the tire back on the motorcycle. First, we're going to jack it back up. While we're here, we're also going to be replacing the brake pads. It's pretty much just a reverse order of the removal. But, like I was saying, while we're here, we're going to go ahead, change these brake pads out. I'm going to show you how. So you got to take those 2 bolts that hold the caliper on, right there. Next, you're going to have 2 flat blade or slotted heads that are pretty much caps, just to cover these Allen heads. And then you got to unscrew these all the way. And then just pull them out. These are what hold your brake pads inside the caliper. So you know your brake pads have those 2 little holes that the pins slide through. These are those pins. Now normally they don't screw like these do, but Honda wanted to do something different and I respect it. I believe the rear caliper just has a clip and a 10mm holding it in. So it's like your normal brake pads. A clip just holds those pins in, but this one the pins actually screw in and out, so it's kind of cool. A little different. But I figured while I was changing the tire, even though these brake pads, the width of them, like they have enough material to still last a while, I'll keep them as spares, but I went ahead and got me a pair of ceramic brake pads for it, and I'm going to replace them with those, and hopefully it'll get me to my next tire change. I do always put a little lube on those pins. Just helps it slide easier. There's the pads. So those 2 holes up top, those are what those pins slide into to keep them on the caliper. Next, you got to compress the pistons inside the caliper. I actually just bought this tool from Harbor Freight, so we're going to try it out. Those are my new brake pads. Yep, they look the same, which is what you want. They kind of match the color of the motorcycle too, which is cool. My dog's really interested. So you got to get this down to the size you need it. Which, there we are. And it's got a little flange on the end. And all that flange does is covers the entire piston. And then you just keep screwing to compress that piston, moving from one side to the other. These calipers are pretty old, so I went ahead and found me a wrench to kind of allow me to get some more mechanical persuasion on these rotors. So next I'm using the old brake pad here, and I'm just using that to compress both of them at the same time. There's a few different tricks you can do. These ones were decently frozen, so that's why I had to go get the wrench, get a little more torque. But I've used like open end wrenches before, along with C-clamps. I've used a lot of things, wood blocks. This is my first time actually using a, brake caliper piston compression tool. Which sounds pretty fancy, but it was like $10 from Harbor Freight. But now I'm just getting both of them in there and making sure the gap is wide enough to compensate for my rotor. And at that point I think I have the pistons compressed enough. I'm putting a little bit of grease on these pins right here. You don't want any grease coming in contact with the braking surface. So that's why I'm using gloves right here and only getting it on those pins. But the brake pads will move and slide up and down those pins, and I don't want it hanging or catching. So that's why I'm adding just a little bit of grease. Hoping to keep my brakes from catching. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to tighten those pins back up. Like I was saying, they do have some flat blade or slotted screws that kind of just cover them, just kind of like a cap. But now let's see if we can get it installed. As you just saw, the answer is yes. Yes, we can get it installed. Right now we are just trying to open up those brake pads just a little more to compensate for the rotor. Newer brake pads are always harder to put a tire back onto, just because you have more material there getting in the way of the rotor. But we just got to get it lined up properly. No time for the other side. Just going to loosen the bolts holding it on right here. And it was pretty tight, so I had to use a little a little more persuasion. On the bright side, these are Allen keys, so you can do that. If you got a little helper that's trying to help too much and not doing a very good job at helping, you might gotta tell her to go away for the time being so that you can get this bolt off. And then she might do something like this and completely redeems herself. I guess that is one thing about changing the tires. Your puppy dog can get a new bed. I don't know why she loves it, but now every time we come in the shop, that's where she chooses to sit, is that old Goldwing tire. But anyways, we got them off. Again, slotted cover, slotted cap, slotted screw cap, protecting those pins. Go ahead, take those off. I know I mentioned it earlier, but this is how I used to compress the pistons on the calipers. You get a 10mm wrench or so, 10, 12, just something that fits well. And then you use a clamp. And that wrench provides adequate surface, like it's flat enough and it's hard enough that you're not going to compress the wrench, but it'll actually compress the pistons. So as you can see, we've got these pretty much fully seated, but we're going to put the old brake pad back on there. Actually going to do both of them to kind of limit the damage to the old brake pads, just because they do have a lot of material left and they could be good spares. But, so you see they are flush, and that is exactly what you want. So we're going to go ahead, get the other brake pads, and going to install them just like we did the other side. Now the old shop dog has fallen asleep inside the tire. I don't know what it is. That doesn't look comfy at all, but I mean, she loves it, so we're just gonna leave her alone. Again, grease these little pins. That's what I'm talking about. They slide in there, and if they catch, they can either cause your motorcycle to not release the brakes or not engage the brakes, just depending on how they snag. So, some grease there just keeps your brake pads moving smoothly. I have taken rotors out and completely polished the rotors before, but these ones, as long as you're able to bleed them properly, I didn't see a reason to take out the pistons and polish the pistons. Like I was saying earlier, I'm trying to make as much space in between those brake pads as possible. The pistons are fully compressed, but again, the brake pads are new, have a lot of material, but they do have to go over the rotor. So that's why I'm just kind of spreading them out as much as I can. You do want to be careful and not dig into the material though. So just a heads up, if you're using like the edge of a screwdriver or something like that, it can dig into the material. I've got this sped up a little bit because it can get, it is a semi-long process, but also don't want to speed it up too much. As you saw, the brakes are doing what they're supposed to. They're causing friction, which is making it hard to get this tire back in the space it needs to go. So we're going to use gravity. We're going to jack it up a little bit and then let the tire set back down a little more. Kind of just checking both of the rotors, making sure it's getting inside the rotors properly. It is difficult because you do have that speedometer sensor and a few other things that can make lining it up properly semi-difficult, but it does just take some time. I'm using a flat blade screwdriver, just kind of straighten it out just a hair. And then you've got your pin. Once all of those are properly lined up, it's when you're able to put your pin in it, then life's good. So right now, whenever I am prying, I'm not prying on the wheel itself, I'm prying on the forks. You don't want to pry on the wheel because you do have that wheel bearing in there. So if you're going to use some leverage, use it on the inside of those forks, just a hair. But like I'm saying, I'm using gravity. like I said, just keep using gravity to your advantage. Just keep working it back and forth. This rod that holds the front wheel to the forks, and it kind of sits on the bearing. I go ahead and I give it a light coat of like disc grease. Just some high strength, high temperature grease. And then you gently tap it in with a hammer, ensuring that the other side is lined up correct. It should be, but you just got to double check and make sure. Then you'll have that nut that we took off 2-3 videos ago. You're just going to reinstall it. Tighten up these. And you're on your way. While we have all of this stuff off though, we're going to go ahead and we're going to bleed the brakes and change all the fluid out of the brakes. So that's what's going to be in store for next episode. This is Octane Restorations. Thanks for watching. You have a good rest of your day.